My name is Anthony Barton. I am a doctoral student at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, currently taking EDL 611. And our assignment tonight is to have a response to the Entering North Carolina Set Clocks Back 100 Years text. Um, this has been a text I've referenced quite a bit over our work this semester, just simply because it's a fascinating read, especially for those folks that sometimes don't spend a lot of time with what's going on in the political arena in North Carolina. Um, Regardless if you're conservative, moderate, liberal, independent, however, which way you choose to identify. Um, the author here spends a considerable amount of time really just stating facts. And even though there may appear to be a slant there for some readers or may perceive it as having a slant, it's really been a fascinating read for me and an easy read for me that's kind of made me think about things, legislation, policy, things that have become things that impact my work as a school principal. It's made me look at it a different way, which leads us to our discussion on chapter 5, backward 2010 to 2014, the Redeemers come again. One of the reasons why I was drawn to have a discussion about this specific chapter is because, first of all, it was recent. I'm 33 years old. I've been in education for 12 years. So sometimes I can't always connect with things that happened in the past, obviously, because I didn't live through it or I wasn't there. But this is very fresh in my memory. When our both the governor's mansion, both houses of the state legislature were controlled by Republicans. This has really given me some perspective that I didn't have before. Beginning early into the chapter, I did not know about the Red State Project. Thinking back as a former social studies teacher, I remember how close our state went blue in the 2008 election for President Obama. Obviously, how that changed in the 2012 election. I remember there at one time, led by the Republicans and the Senate still being controlled by the Democrats. But I didn't know about the Red State Project. And I didn't know about how these super PACs poured all this money into North Carolina, $2.2 million into 22 of the races. Ultimately, more than $10 million was spent to sway folks to go out and vote, obviously conservative, helping North Carolina, who are helping Republicans gain control of the Senate. And not only just gaining control of both the Senate and the House, but super majorities as well, so that they have veto-proof majorities in the event that they just wanted to leave the governor out of everything policy and law related. I like the quote that he used. He said, "I chose to call them redeemers, like the white supremacists who took over the state in 1898 called themselves, as I seek to make clear they aren't your Republican traditionalists. They are more backward yearning. They have their briefcases full of legislation fashioned for them by ALEC and brimming with bad ideas. Some of those, just to give some examples, Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, nativism, and creationism." He references Tim Tillis as a perfect example of it references Tim here. He was facing the now deceased Kay Hagan in November, so we obviously knew he won the Senate seat. But it talked about the things that he did when he was, I think, the leader of the Senate. That were just detrimental to North Carolina. Mr. Tillis cut federal employment benefits and refused to pay back what the state owed to Washington, which ultimately left us without those long-term benefits. He cut back on education spending, prompting many talented teachers to leave the state, and repealed the Radical Justice Act, which gave DEFRA inmates a shot at proving they were victims of discrimination. Things most for me as a public educator is to see that we're now spending less money, of course, based on inflation, in public education than we did pre-recession. And even some of the money that we are appropriating for education, we're cutting from public schools, but putting it into the form of opportunity scholarships and vouchers. And then also just the whole charter school debate that that it's okay that there are still public schools, but they're not held to the same accountability measures as public schools are. Those are just some of the things that I referenced in this chapter. Moving on over to the 2012 election, just a couple of notes that I made that I thought was interesting. When talking about the election between former Governor Pat McCrory and former Lieutenant Governor Walter Docton, it said he was hurt by having to spend money in a primary when money was hard for Democrats to come by. So I think when Governor Perdue announced late that she wasn't going to run for the governor's office again, it just put Democrats in a scramble to try and find someone. And as a result, he just got a late start. Money came in late, and so he just wasn't able to come up with a formidable campaign. To kind of take our direction, or the direction of our conversation more to Governor McCrory and some of the things that he and this conservative legislature were able to accomplish in such a short period of time, I want to talk about the things that happened between 2012 and 2016 in the state of North Carolina that some folks may not recognize or realize. And I think, although I feel like I'm a fairly educated person and enjoy current events and watching the news and reading the news, it took me reading this chapter by Jim to see that these things happen in such a quick succession that I don't even know if folks realized how the political landscape in North Carolina was changed so dramatically, so drastically, so quickly. Governor McCrory had vowed to change North Carolina. It appears that change means taking us back to a time when North Carolina was a low-wage state dependent on labor-intensive industries and vying with Mississippi for the title of least progressive. Just to give you some examples of some of the legislation that was passed by our Senate and House and then signed by the governor, was the new laws requiring photo IDs to vote, imposing a flat tax, making it more difficult to obtain an abortion, cutting unemployment benefits, cutting public school appropriations while giving vouchers for public schools, which we just for private schools, which we just discussed, reducing or weakening regulation on businesses, restarting execution, and weakening gun laws. John Hood, who we know is of the John Locke Foundation, said that other states have done this before. Same thing North Carolina has done, but never this quick. Never all in one legislation session, and he called it phenomenal. Everybody, of course, wasn't in agreement with this. Darren Jackson, who's a Democrat, worried that North Carolina has had a moderate brand to companies for a long time. But with this partisan shift, a problem when you're trying to attract new businesses, there's a problem when you're trying to attract new businesses when you keep trying to keep the brightest minds in the state. Again, regardless of your political affiliation or how you feel things should operate, it's important to keep an open mind. And what I'm afraid of with some of these things and the comment that Mr. Jackson made is, are new businesses, especially from those that maybe are from more liberal states, from the West Coast or from up north, are they going to feel comfortable coming and investing millions of dollars into North Carolina when some of the most basic things some of the most basic freedoms that people enjoy in other parts of the country is frowned upon here? Are we going to be able to attract new businesses or retain the ones that are here, that are paying taxes, that are employers, that folks depend on for their jobs? Are we going to be able to keep them when our public school system is being underfunded? Not just underfunded, but reduced. Not just the public school system, but our UNC system as well. There was somewhere in this chapter that said that Dr. Jim, I'm going to say Louise, says that the UNC system used to be the crown jewel of North Carolina, but even the millions upon millions of dollars that have been lost there is also something that causes great concern for a great many people. So I'll finish with this. What the lower taxes will do, because obviously conservatives, they believe in less government, less taxes, less oversight. What the lower taxes will do is hurt North Carolina's school system. Note that the new budget is anticipated to bring in $2.4 billion less over the next 5 years. Public school funding has fallen from $7.9 billion in 2007-2008 to $7.5 billion during the current year. Given normal growth, the budget should have been $9.9 billion. The UNC system endured a budget cut to $2.6 billion, whereas, again, with normal growth, it would have been $3.7 billion. All of this when North Carolina was never been a high-tax state. So we were funding our public schools. We were funding the UNC system at least what was considered adequate, and increasing those funds as the needs arise without being a state that was seen as having a high tax burden on their citizens. He finished the chapter with this. At one time, creative Southern governors such as William Winter of Mississippi and Bill Clinton of Arkansas beat a path to North Carolina to learn about the newest policy innovations. That means they came here to see what we were doing because we were considered a moderate state. Now the conversation in Raleigh has flipped. It is focused on how North Carolina can catch up to its neighbors by having the lowest taxes and the fewest regulations. North Carolina has moved from being a regional leader to a follower, and that indeed is sad. What that has to do with my work as a principal, as a doctoral student, is just making sure I'm educated, that I'm making good voting decisions, that when folks ask my opinion about things, that I'm able to have unbiased responses based on what is happening in Raleigh. I think sometimes we can underestimate what happens in Raleigh and the impact that it can have on our lives and on our work. But this absolutely has an impact on my work because it reduces our opportunities to be the most effective teachers, principals, school counselors, teacher assistants, custodians, cafeteria assistants, and bus drivers that we can. We just can't be the most impactful when we don't have what we need to provide the best education for our students. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So I am enjoying this book. Still got a couple more chapters to read before the end of the semester, but it really has opened my eyes to several things. Thank you.